Hi everyone, welcome and thank you for joining us today. My name is Ciara and I'm the Digital Events Manager at Connecting Up and TechSoup New Zealand. Connecting Up and TechSoup New Zealand are part of the Info Exchange Group, a not-for-profit social enterprise that tackles the busiest social challenges through the smart and creative use of technology. For those of you who haven't attended a webinar session with us before, Connecting Up and TechSoup facilitate an annual training calendar of online webinars, workshops, boot camps and webcons. Help the social sector upskill in all things digital. You should check out our training and education menu on our website for more events coming up online. Enough about that. I'm excited to welcome you today to Creating a Digital Front Door with Rosa Thompson and Emma Farrell from Amazon Web. Rosa is an account manager focused on Australian non-profit organisations in Victoria and Tasmania. She is passionate about helping customers leverage technology to have a greater impact. Rosa completed her MBA at UTS in 2020 and has been at AWS for nearly 4 years. Previously, she worked in a New York-based blockchain application studio, Consensus, and has also worked in a number of Australian startups. She now resides in Ballarat in regional Victoria. Emma is an account manager focused on Australian not-profit organisations in New South Wales. She thrives on empowering customers to harness technology to make a difference. Originally from the UK, Emma studied politics and international relations at the University of Manchester. She's worked in enterprise technology for 9 years before joining AWS almost 3 years ago. All your lines are muted, so if you have any technical issues today, please type it in the questions box on your webinar panel and I'll be able to assist you. If you have any questions during the session, please also type these in the webinars or in the questions box, and Emma and Rosa will answer them either during the session when possible or at the end of the webinar. We really encourage you to ask as many questions as you think throughout the session to make this as dynamic and interactive as possible. No question is too silly, but also note your comments and questions will not appear to the entire group. If you're on a Wi-Fi connection and have multiple programs open, this can sometimes affect the quality of the audio and video of the webinar. And if possible, please close all other programs to help you have the best experience today. Note that this webinar is being recorded and a link to the recording and any slides will be sent to you as soon as we can after the webinar ends. Before we start, I'd also like to mention that there's a short survey at the end of the webinar, and if you could take the time to complete this, we really would appreciate it. Thanks for joining us today, and I'll hand you over to Emma and Rosa.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Good afternoon if you're in New Zealand. Welcome to our webinar on creating a digital front door. So today's session is going to be about how to use cloud computing and specifically Amazon Web Services or AWS to enhance user experience, improve efficiency, reduce costs, and increase your organization's impact. And as Ciara said, I'm Rosa Thompson and I'm an account manager looking after non-profit organizations in Victoria.
And hi, I'm Emma Farrell, Rosa's equivalent in New South Wales.
So Emma and I are lucky enough to get to work with non-profits day in and day out in our roles. So we get a front row seat to see them do the incredible work that you all do. And we're excited to share a bit about that today. And we also want to share with you what's possible with AWS and how your organization can build an even more impactful digital presence. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which Amazon Australia operates our business and where we come together throughout Australia. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. And I'd like to extend that respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people present on the call today. And we also wanted to share this image with you that we really love. This is an original painting that's hanging in our Brisbane office. It's a commissioned artwork by a contemporary Indigenous artist, Shanae Sutton, from Northwest Queensland. And it's her interpretation of Amazon Australia across the states that we operate in. And before we dive into the content that we've prepared for you, I just want to go over the agenda. So we're going to look at the history of Amazon Web Services, what is cloud computing, what is a digital front door, We'll talk about how to use technology to improve staff, volunteer, and customer experiences. We'll discuss managing data in the cloud, in particular, how data can provide nonprofits with valuable insights about their impact. And finally, we'll talk a bit about AWS's nonprofit programs and resources. And as Ciara said, we want to encourage you to feel free to ask questions in the chat, and we'll address them during or in the Q&A section at the end. And at the end, we'll try to do some questions live as well. So jumping in, this is probably what you think of when you think of Amazon. It's what you're all familiar with in terms of our e-commerce website and fulfillment centers. So how is it that we are here talking about Amazon Web Services and the cloud? How did it all come to be? So it all began in the early 2000s when Amazon.com, founded by Jeff Bezos in 1994, was experiencing its own rapid growth and expansion. And as the company scaled around the world, we faced the challenge of managing our own vast global infrastructure, which included massive data centers to support our online retail operations. And in the process of tackling these challenges, our technical teams developed a suite of internal tools to manage our infrastructure more effectively. These tools allowed us to automate processes, rapidly provision IT resources, and dynamically adjust capacity to meet demand fluctuations. And the breakthrough came when we realized that these internal tools could be immensely helpful beyond the scope of Amazon's own needs. So in 2006, we officially launched AWS, introducing cloud computing to the world. And this was a real game changer because instead of needing to purchase and manage physical hardware, organizations could now access computing resources over the internet. So this model democratized access to sophisticated technology, allowing startups, government organizations, and indeed nonprofits to access the same powerful computing capabilities that were once exclusive to just very large corporations. I wanted to share a bit about our culture at Amazon too. So we have what we call our leadership principles that help us in making decisions, whether we're discussing an idea for a new project or the best way to solve a problem. And we're all encouraged to consider ourselves leaders within the organization. There are 16 leadership principles, but I just wanted to highlight a few of them. In particular, one is called customer obsession. So that leadership principle states that leaders start with the customer and work backwards. They work vigorously to earn and keep customer trust. And although leaders pay attention to competitors, they obsess over customers. And then another one is invent and simplify, which says that leaders expect and require innovation and invention from teams and always find ways to simplify. They're externally aware, look for ideas from everywhere, and are not limited by not invented here. And as we do new things, we accept that we may be misunderstood for long periods of time. And in that vein, I wanted to share that when AWS was first introduced in 2006, it was actually met with quite a lot of skepticism. Cloud computing was a relatively new concept, and many businesses were hesitant to embrace it due to concerns about security and reliability. But AWS quickly gained traction among startups and computer programmers or developers who recognized the potential benefits of the cloud's scalability, and it gave them the freedom to experiment. So as they experimented with new projects and discovered the cloud's flexibility, cost effectiveness, and the speed at which you can provision IT resources, it began to gain momentum and credibility. And today we serve millions of customers worldwide across various industries. And in particular here in Australia, we have two regions, one in Melbourne and one in Sydney. And there's a region in Auckland that's launching in 2024, which we're very excited about. So what is cloud computing exactly? Putting it simply, cloud computing is the on-demand delivery of IT resources and applications via the internet with a pay-as-you-go pricing model. So we've already touched on it a little bit, but basically what's significant about cloud is that in the days of traditional IT, teams had to set up and maintain on-premises data centers or infrastructure. So this meant that they spent a lot of time procuring hardware, designing and configuring networks, installing software, planning for scaling, implementing backup and disaster recovery, and just handling a whole bunch of routine maintenance tasks and monitoring for security risks. And all of that requires a significant amount of upfront capital investment, and it also has geographical constraints. Whereas cloud computing, on the other hand, has changed the IT landscape by providing a flexible alternative. So it eliminates the need for physical infrastructure and maintenance because it abstracts away what we call the undifferentiated heavy lifting of managing IT resources. So that then empowers teams to really focus on their core missions. And in this way, cloud computing resembles a utility model where you can access computing like you would access electricity or water. And the pay-as-you-go aspect as well is similar to a utility in that you're just paying for resources that you consume as you consume them. And we're always looking as well to pass on the economies of scale that cloud allows for. So we've proactively reduced pricing 29 times since 2006. And the last slide for this little intro section, I wanted to just share that there are a bunch of companies whose platforms you might already be using that run their entire IT system in AWS. So you're probably already using AWS in the back end without realizing it. Companies like Netflix, Airbnb, SAP, Salesforce, Slack, etc., all rely on AWS to power their operations. And obviously these are enormous organizations, but there's no project too small for AWS. Everyone starts somewhere, and certainly the kind of customers that Emma and I support are not at this kind of scale. We just wanted you to be assured that the same performance and security tooling that, say, NASA, for example, is using is also available to you as a small or medium-sized nonprofit. And that's really the power of the cloud. And I just want to pause here for a moment and just ask if there are any questions. You're welcome to put them in the chat. We just covered a fair amount of ground in terms of the introduction to cloud computing. And while you're thinking about that, I will hand over to Emma.
Thanks, Rosa. Hopefully that background to Amazon Web Services and our history is useful and gives some context to who we are as an organisation. What I want to talk to you about next is one of the ways we often start with nonprofit organisations in Australia, and that is helping them with the concept of a digital front door. So this may or may not be a term that you're familiar with, but what essentially it means is similar to a physical reception, a digital front door directs people to the right services and people to help them. So this doesn't hinge on any single product, but leverages technologies including websites, applications, and communications like phone calls, text, and emails to offer a seamless experience to all stakeholders. And the real reason this is of huge benefit to organizations is that customers that have this digital footprint are able to build a much better profile of the people that engage with them. And so this can be donors, it can be volunteers, it can be service users and staff. And so by using these digital insights, you're better able to understand your organization and better able to serve these customers. And so where in reality this often actually starts with for customers is by dealing with what I'm sure many of you here on the call deal with a lot, and that is paper and helping turn that paper into digital solutions. So at the moment, it is highly likely that organizations here on the call, you may have paper-based systems to do rostering, to do donation management, to do volunteer forms and all kinds of things. And one of the ways that we really help customers is by turning these into websites, mobile applications, or electronic messages. And this isn't a case of using technologies for technology's sake, but to help deliver faster response times to stakeholders. And there are huge advantages to like having a record, for example, of forms that were historically paper-based into making them digital. It means that volunteers don't have to duplicate information. And if you've got stakeholders that are perhaps a volunteer and a donor, or a staff member and a customer, right now a paper-based system doesn't join these relationships up, whereas technology can show a much more coherent view of all of the people that interact with your organization. And so in terms of deciding perhaps which digital medium is best, it will depend on the preference of your organization, the type of work that you do, and your use cases for technology. I think some of the things Rosa alluded to before is the absolute breadth of AWS services. The kind of concept behind us is that there are multiple building blocks of services that could be configured to answer all sorts of use cases. So some customers use our services to build, say, like websites or portals or applications. Other customers actually use them more to focus on engagement, such as omni-channel experiences. So using emails, voice communication, text. And so it really depends on the use case of your organizations. And one of the things Rosa and I spend a lot of time working with when we're talking to our customers is to understand perhaps what gaps or challenges or problems your organization is facing to determine the right kind of solution that's going to meet those challenges. And so these are some examples of some of the different ways that customers use our digital solutions to help deliver better customer service. This isn't an exhaustive list, but hopefully gives you some indication of some of the technology that's kind of currently available for customers. And then how I thought this might help be brought to life a little bit is with one of the case studies with one of our customers here in Australia. And so this here on the screen is a case study of a project that was done between our Melbourne-based partner Toobles and Scouts Australia, an organisation that many of you may be familiar with, either because you have been part of the organisation either in childhood or currently as perhaps a volunteer or adult helper. And so traditionally, Scouts was an incredibly paper-based organisation where all sorts of records and achievements and activities were logged in a book, in a physical paper-based book that each Scout member had. And it might not be a surprise to many of you on the call that paper books and teenagers generally don't always tend to make the most long-term of companions. And this was actually quite problematic for the organisation because people's records and achievements within Scouts can be really helpful when it comes to, say, a TAFE application or a university application. And so by not having a long-term record of what achievements had been completed by various members, these members weren't gaining the full benefit of the experience that they'd had with the organisation. And similarly, from a leadership level, Scouts management weren't actually sure which activities were most popular and which activities had the most impact. So what Scouts did in conjunction with Toobles is really transform the organisation by developing an application called Terrain, which totally replaced the paper book-based system. And so this allowed things like the end user scouts to have visibility of all possible activities in their region and request activities that maybe weren't available by their particular leader, but some other stakeholder could deliver. And it also meant that the organisation had a real view on which programs were successful, which programs were most in demand, and what was the kind of true benefit and engagement within their organisation. So and from a volunteer perspective, it's also been really transformative in that adult helpers used to have to measure achievement or create upwards of like 25 pieces of paper to measure after a particular session, which is really time consuming and meant a bigger burden than perhaps was necessary was put on volunteers. So by moving to an app, which could be used offline as well, so when Scouts were perhaps in remote locations, it means that successful completion of activities and stages can all be logged by volunteers in a much quicker, easier way. So this has had huge benefits for the organisation. And it's just one example of how an organisation has moved from paper-based to digital, but really solved a lot of problems that they were experiencing. Now I'm going to hand back to Rosa, who's going to talk about a very different kind of case study with another Australian customer called Library for All.
Thanks, Emma. Yeah, so this is one of my customers, and they're based here in Australia, but operate all over the world and then also in Indigenous communities. Library for All are a non-profit, and they've partnered with us in order to ensure access to education. In this particular case study, we're highlighting 4 Ukrainian children who are impacted by the recent conflict in that part of the world. So we host their cloud-based digital library application on AWS, and it provides culturally relevant books on a durable e-reader device. So those devices were sent out to Poland in order to support these kids. And using what we call serverless infrastructure, they were able to rapidly and cost-effectively re-architect their digital library and get nearly 300 books launched quickly for Ukrainian kids who can no longer go to school. And these books are then used in over 200 learning centres run by Save the Children and the Ukrainian government. So this is an example of a non-profit using the power of cloud to further their core mission activities beyond more effectively managing their back office administration, which is obviously really important too. So just giving you a couple of examples of different ways that Australian organisations are using the cloud. And again, at this point, just want to remind you, if you have any questions about these case studies or what we've just talked about in terms of how you can use cloud, feel free to send them in. And Ciara, if you want to interrupt me.
I do have a question, Rosa, actually.
Yep,
This is from
absolutely.
Andrew. Andrew wants to know, is there a type of audit process undertaken? As an organisation with many volunteers, often the total picture is not known.
Do you want to go, Emma?
So I suppose it depends what exactly you're kind of looking for. So if I've understood the question correctly, if you want to perhaps use a digital solution to better understand your volunteers and their profile, then absolutely there can be places where technology could be used for that. And this is where, in a customer example, Rosa and I, we spend a lot of our time talking with customers to really deeply understand the challenge, and to then, because there are different ways technology could be used to solve a problem, we'd want to perhaps understand the issue a little bit more, if that's kind of the right angle.
Feel free to put any follow-ups. And yeah, I'll just add to that. I was assuming it was based on the Scouts case study. But as Emma said, a lot of what we do is discovery with our customers, especially in the initial stages, as we're getting to know a new organization, we'll have meetings, and there's us as account managers, and then we also work hand in hand with solution architects. So we're always kind of two on a call, the kind of customer side and the technical side, so that we can really have a deep conversation about what's required on both the business side of things and the technical side of things, because really understanding the problem that an organization is looking to solve is really important, because we do have this enormous breadth of services that are available. And so everything is pretty much bespoke, unless it's a software platform that sits on AWS. If you're actually using AWS directly, it generally tends to be that it's a configured solution that's really based on your organization's needs. So everyone is different. And that makes our jobs really cool, because pretty much every solution that we deal with is different based on the organization.
Andrew followed up with a question. He said, yes, I was thinking more of moving to the cloud, working out what you need before you start the process.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're happy to work through that with you, and that's really what our roles are about, because it is an involved process, and we want to make sure that our customers feel really well supported. And it's great that we get to be industry aligned, because then as we work with more and more nonprofits, I mean, I'm 2 years in this role, and I was in a different role previously. And it's just been really great over that time to expand my knowledge of the nonprofit industry in ANZ, and you learn from every engagement, and then you're able to take those learnings to the next organization that you work with. So yeah, what about you, Emma?
Yeah, I guess when you look to start with the cloud, because it can be, I guess, a very broad topic, this is where, yeah, we're really happy to give guidance and to understand as well. Certain customers like to have an out-of-the-box solution that they just want to purchase that solves a particular problem. And there are partners that we have that offer exactly those kind of solutions. And so part of our job is, if a solution can be solved in that way and it's the right fit, is to understand the partners that are out there and to facilitate those introductions. Or if a customer has some technical capability and wants to do something themselves, then absolutely, that is exactly what Rosa and I are here to guide on.
Thank you for the question. It's great to have it be interactive. So please, everyone, feel free to keep asking questions. Just going to the next slide. So I'm going to talk a little bit now about managing data in the cloud at a high level. So you might have heard people say data is the new oil. It's a trendy thing to say, but what does it actually mean? So the reason that data is really valuable is because it is essentially business intelligence, and it helps to inform decision making. And migrating to the cloud offers a key benefit of consolidating an organization's data, which is what Emma was talking about earlier. And nonprofits often collect a lot of really valuable data on donors, volunteers, members, and how they're interacting with the organization, but struggle to derive insights from it because it's siloed and there's not necessarily a data management structure in place. And so with these kinds of tools that are available through AWS, in particular data governance tools, it helps to ensure that you have a compliant and automated system where you're controlling access to data and its life cycle, and that you're able to really extract a lot more value from it in terms of analytics and things like data lakes, and that there's security tooling around it. And it's all available through one pane of glass. So inside of your one AWS account, you have all these different options that you can choose from in terms of what you need. And so that helps you to facilitate a modern data strategy in the simplest way possible. And again, this is a whole process that we can talk you through and make our solution architects available for these conversations as well, and partners, as Emma was mentioning. And so all of that means that you can begin to really leverage your data, and that it can help you to make better decisions and improve your organization over time. And then I just want to talk about the analytics and visualization layer. So once all of the data is consolidated and you've got a management structure in place, data visualization is the process of using visual elements like charts, graphs, maps to represent data. So it translates complex, high volume or numerical data in a way that it's easier to process. And data visualization tools are tools that automate the visual communication process. So you might track things like KPIs, net promoter scores, donor lifetime value, website conversion, and then you can use visual representations to extract actionable insights from this raw data, which helps to identify patterns or trends through graphics, interactive dashboards, and reports that you can build, often with no coding required. And this helps to create stories that advance business intelligence and support data-driven decision-making and strategic planning. Essentially, that you can gain and share insights fast.
Oh, wow. It wouldn't be 2023 without just a mention of generative AI. So I'm sure many of you have heard of this topic, or perhaps seen it through ChatGPT or the OpenAI visual tools. And you'll know that generative AI is when technology can provide its own kind of responses in terms of text and images to particular inputs or questions. And it won't surprise you that an organization with the scale of AWS and the breadth of our services also is offering services in this space. And so the way we're approaching things is for organizations that have their own large amounts of data, we have got the capability for them to develop their own bespoke generative AI solution to meet their business needs. And then we also have partners that are building out industry-specific solutions that can use this technology to help industry use cases. And so in terms of the nonprofit sector, where we are seeing trends in the market is around using generative AI to perhaps improve customer experiences. So for example, being able to summarize phone conversations with the salient points, or make suggestions based on FAQs as to help answer particular queries. And there will also be use cases around automated report generation and text summarization. And then a really exciting product that we sort of talked about in launch last week is around the transcription of conversations in Notes and Insights. So this is initially going to be targeted at the healthcare professional space, where medical professionals are spending a lot of time talking and identifying particular problems, and then have to separately spend their time writing up these as notes. And so it's looking at how to use a solution to be able to automate that process, to free up the time of people so they can actually spend more time with the people that matter. And so absolutely we can see this being expanded out into other aspects of care and other kinds of stakeholders. This is all very kind of new and emergent, but no doubt that this will be an area that expands greatly in the coming years. And so now actually this might help link back to the question that we had earlier as well, in terms of if you want to get started with AWS, or if you think something we've said today is interesting or has sparked some interest and you want to understand a little bit about how we help customers and how you might be able to get started. But of course, Rosa and myself are here and we very much make ourselves available to talk to customers, to understand challenges and to recommend solutions. But beyond this, for customers that have kind of technical capabilities and a willingness to use services kind of on their own, we have a lot of free virtual training that explains kind of how to use our services, best practices, recommended configurations, and how to get the best value from the technology that we offer. And in addition, as Rosa alluded to, we have technical specialists. So these can be product specialists or solution architects that can either recommend particular products for particular use cases or validate infrastructure ideas and design. But of course, there are a lot of organizations that just don't have that kind of technical capability. Particularly, we understand you've got your focus on your kind of core mission, and this might be considered a little bit ancillary to what you do. And so to assist organizations, we have a really wide and deep partner network here in Australia. And I guess broadly, there's two kinds of partners that we've got. So there are consultancy partners, such as the partner Two Balls that I mentioned earlier that work with Scouts Australia. And consultancy partners work on behalf of customers to build things, so build solutions like websites, like applications, like portals, and on behalf of a customer can design a digital solution. In addition, we've got technology partners that build fully formed solutions using AWS technology that then sell those solutions directly to customers. So for example, many of you might use the likes of Monday.com to help with kind of fundraising management. That is a solution built on AWS that's available to customers. And so again, when we kind of get queries, it's understanding whether there might be a platform out there that meets the use case already that might be easier for a customer to manage, or whether a solution might be something that you want to build either yourselves or with a partner. And if you're not sure on these things, Rosa and I can absolutely kind of help determine. And then in terms of further resources that we have for the nonprofit industry, another team that we have here in Australia is our digital innovation team, and they specialise in helping organisations that have a particular problem or have a challenge, but don't necessarily have a clear solution in mind for that challenge. And they do what's called a working backwards engagement with customers that literally works backwards from that problem to really tease out what kind of possible viable solutions. And so if you already think, for example, an app or a website is what you want to do, then the digital innovation team are not the right team to engage, but they can be really useful at helping unpick some challenges that customers are facing to determine the right approach to solve them. In addition, of course, we provide credits for nonprofit organisations transacted here with Connecting Up, and we also have a kind of cloud maturity assessment. This is a quite new tool that was developed by our global team in America to help organisations help understand, especially at that starting point of cloud, some key considerations, and to really understand where they might be on a journey and how they might be able to move forward.
Yeah, and I just wanted to piggyback on what Emma said, and talk a little bit more about that kind of consultative aspect of what we do, which is all, I will say too, because sometimes people have a little bit of ambiguity about this. It's all, free as part of being an AWS or prospective AWS user, because we understand that moving to the cloud is a big proposition and it's a complex one. And so our whole role is really around making that easier for customers. But AWS itself actually is just really focused on people using the platform. It's not us selling our services in a way that I think sometimes people expect when we talk about these kinds of teams, like the digital innovation team and what have you. But for example, today I'm going to go to Tasmania with my solution architect, and we're doing an immersion day in person at our customer's office tomorrow. And they're the Integrated Marine Observatory System. I can tell you that because they're a public reference, or IMOS they're called, and they basically do all of the marine science for the Southern Australian region. So they have hundreds of sensors in the ocean, and they're tracking animals and weather patterns and all sorts of things. It's obviously very data heavy, and we're workshopping with them DevOps tools that they could be using to really speed up the processing time of that data crunching that they do on AWS. And we also often do with our customers something called a well-architected framework review, which is where we go through a series of best practice pillars that we have and help a customer to assess how they're doing against each of those pillars. So it might be operational excellence or security, reliability in terms of disaster recovery, performance efficiency, or cost optimization. So we're actually looking at if there are resources that a customer's using that they really don't actually need and that they could turn off or reduce in order to save money that's being spent ineffectively, and then just put that back towards their core mission or use it to do a new project, basically use it in a more effective way. So yeah, just some of the things that we often look at when we're working with an organization, especially in the beginning as we're getting to know a new organization. A well-architected can be a really good way of us kind of getting an overview of the organization's IT systems at a kind of broad level. So I find it really useful for that. And at this point, we've covered our kind of talk at you content, but would be very happy to answer questions and to do it live at this point, Ciara, if we can. If anyone wants to raise their hand or type that they have a question, very happy to be available to have some discussion. Thank you.
All right, we haven't tried this before, so yes, we're definitely, if anyone does have a question, we can raise your hand and we can live, or if you don't want to talk live, that is fine, you can type it into the questions box as well. Just while we're waiting there, just I know you guys are working closely with us here at Connecting Up with the credit programs. What can you offer if our members for Connecting Up, like what kind of benefits will they have by chatting to you guys? Do you know?
Do you want to take it, Emma, or shall I?
Oh, sure. So yeah, I guess we've actually expanded our credit program recently, which is great news, and has been done at a global level. But pretty much eligible, which is any charitable registered organization, can get $1,000 of AWS credit for a year's consumption, and that's an annual basis. And so that costs $100 to transact. So as long as someone is spending like more than $100 with us, that's US dollars, it makes sense to kind of purchase those credits. And so
Yeah.
some great examples that we've got here, some customers, for example, run a website for a whole year using those credits, so it is completely cost neutral. And there are various sort of mobile applications and different technologies that organizations can cover for a full 12 months based on those credits. So it's really wonderful to see that.
Just going here. Nobody seems to have any questions. You guys seem to have covered everything for everyone. Just while we're waiting, if anyone else does have a question, we have a recording of this webinar, which I will upload later today, and all the slides as well with all those case notes, Scouts Australia that the girls have shown you today. We will load them up as well, available to everybody. Yeah, do you guys have anything else that you want to finish with before we wrap up today?
But I guess if anyone does have anything further, our email addresses are here on these slides. So absolutely feel free to contact us or add us on LinkedIn or get in touch in any way. And now or even further down the line, super happy to help with sort of any query, even if you don't necessarily think it might be us. Speak to us anyway, because we might be able to assist.
Yes. I think it's Rosa said it lovely at the start. It's very not a lot of time that people get the chance to actually speak to someone behind these big organizations. So it's been great having you here today. And yeah, and Rosa, do you have anything that you'd like to finish with?
Yeah, I was just going to add that we really value being able to be here today in talking to you all on this webinar, and we were sponsors at the Connecting Up conference for the second time this year, and that's been such a wonderful journey. I've been there both years, and for us, just we're at the beginning of our journey, I think, in Australia as AWS of really launching into the nonprofit industry, and really getting to understand the local industry and people, and with each use case, I think we dial it in even more. So just really glad to be able to connect. And as Emma said, please feel free to email us or add us on LinkedIn, and we'd be happy to set up time to talk to you in a meeting and just get to know what are the kinds of challenges that you're looking at potentially solving with technology.
All right. Well, I think that is it today. If no one has any other questions, for myself, thank you so much, guys. It's been a pleasure. I find all this interesting. I love the whole stuff about the cloud, and I think it's something that all organizations should be really seriously looking at. I think it's the best way forward. So it's been great having you in person, and we'll chat soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.